For the artists, for the passionate. Welcome to the Adventures Elsewhere podcast. Hello everyone and welcome back to the Adventures Elsewhere podcast. I am your host Jade Black, and today I'm talking about why passion matters in writing. In particular, I'm going to touch a little bit on other creative things as well, but this is going to be mainly a writing episode because that's what this podcast is about. This does tie a little bit into the craft books miniseries I have going on. There is a dedicated playlist to that now for what it is worth, because I have touched on in those episodes that a lot of people who are craft book apologists really just rail on people who have passion, like you're immature and you're childish, you're romantic, you don't know anything about the industry. And it's like, yeah, because those things are definitely mutually exclusive. Definitely. That's 100% how it works. If you care about things, then you automatically lose all knowledge of economics and business. Yeah. Gotcha. But I don't want to keep on that tack for too long, because that's not really what this podcast is about. Let's be positive today. The real reason, if you want to be business oriented about this, is there's no fast money in publishing. If you're trad pub, and even if you get agent on first query and publisher on first sale attempt, if you are just if that somehow happens by some fucking miracle, you're still going to be waiting, years for your book to come out. It's going to be at least 2, probably more like 3. But even if you want to skip the agent process and go for indie, it's still going to take at least a year. Even if you're stealthing it, you've got to write the damn book. And to write a first draft, for me, that takes, give or take, 9 months. Other people might be faster, and it might be more like 4 or 6, but then you've got to edit it as well, and get a cover design and taglines and synopses and blurbs and all sorts of. It takes time. Enjoy the ride, if nothing else. If you don't have any passion, I'm not really sure how you're expecting to stick it out, to be honest. But I'm going to touch on that a bit more in a minute, because I want to talk about doing your book justice. If you don't have passion and you don't care, I don't think you can really do a book justice. I don't think you can care about the use of every word enough, and you can't care about the characters and the plot enough. If you don't have to have passion from page 1. I think it's quite difficult to do that with a new project, especially if it's not part of a bigger series or compendium or anything like that. If it's just a straight up standalone, I think it can be quite difficult to have passion for it from the get-go. But if you don't gain it at some point, if you don't get really, really invested, why are you writing it? What's keeping you doing that? Because if it's the promise of money, mate, I don't know what to tell you. That is not gonna... Boy, then that's when people don't know anything about the publishing industry. And when it comes to editing, I did touch on this a little bit, the detail that needs to go into editing and the care of editing and needing to know, okay, but this quiet character moment is really important, the character arcs and everything is really important, even just a quiet moment to breathe or a touch of comedy in a really dark piece is really important. We need to keep that. If you don't have the passion, I don't know that you spot that in the same way. I want to go a bit more on the commitment topic, because, I've mentioned, you're going to take even if you're selfing it and you're a really fast writer and editor, it's going to be 6 months minimum before anything makes it out. And 6 months is a pretty decent chunk of time. It's a big commitment to write, 70,000 words. Especially if, like me, you're handwriting that. It's a lot. If you think about a dissertation for an undergraduate degree, that's 10k. You're doing that 7 times over for a book. If you're writing, longer genres like fantasy, you could be doing that up to like 10 times over. It's a big commitment, and not only do you have to write all that, you have to edit it and read it over however many times people do that, and just all sorts. It's a lot. Especially if you're talking about series and compendia, then with me, I've got 8 books. That's a massive commitment. And short story collections, that's something I'm going to break. I am working on that a little bit. And that is just as big a commitment as writing a novel, if not more, actually, I would argue. Because not only do you have to write the same amount of copy, you also have to think about, titles for each short. You have to think about what order you're going to put them in. You have to edit them as shorts, not as full length. It's a different process. And you have to also make sure everything flows together and ties. And how you order things in a short story collection is a fucking nightmare. It really is. It's really difficult. Art suites, this is where we touch on other art forms. You want to do a suite of art pieces, so one I've worked on that's kind of an AU thing, by the time this goes out, I hope it will be done, is a suite of 4 pictures of my 8 determined ones as vampires, because I thought it would be a fun thing to do originally for Halloween, and then I just thought, I'll do it now, why not? And again, you're drawing like 8 characters, some are full body shots, some are not. And you've got to, for something like that, I did a lot of work on fashion design, because I wanted it to be sort of red and black, sort of classic gothic-y vampire type deal, but and suits and all that, but customizing a suit to maybe look a bit more generic vampire for someone like Haru who wants to blend in a bit, or, have a really badass one for Hanzo with spider lilies on it because he's Hanzo. Or someone like Isamu, who just wears arty clothing and trying to make a sort of really arty looking vampire-ish suit, but is also still clearly a suit with a guitar in front of it. That was a challenge. It was a lot of fun, and I also did a lot on fang designs, because all 8 of them have slightly different fangs, and Haru has these tiny adorable little ones, and it's genuinely just so precious. But someone like he has double fangs, and Shinichi has 6. And the why for that and the nuance, and it's even the concepting, there's a lot of thought that goes into that, and then you got to sketch that out and colour it and do all the lighting. Lighting takes a while. It's not something like that, even if it's just a piece of only I say only 4 art pieces, it might not seem as much, I think a completely different level to writing a novel. But it's not an amount of work to be sniffed at. It's not. It's akin to writing something really pretty long. It's a lot of work. And if you're talking about music, making an album, that's something I've done a few times over now. That's a lot of work, because you've got to, write all the parts. If you're a solo artist, like I was, then you've got to write all the parts, record them all, edit them all, produce them, mix them, master them, cover design, artwork, get it on distributor. It's a lot of work. And, making a game as a game dev, oh boy, that's a lot of work, because you need code for everything. You need a sprite for everything. You need a contingency for everything. It's a lot of work. And even, hell, this podcast. It's one of the least intensive things I do. Which probably tells you a lot about me. But, I still have to make each board. I have to come up with ideas for each episode, do a board, lay out everything nicely, make sure I'm not missing anything, set aside, 20 minutes, half an hour to actually record. I actually do 2 at once, generally, so it's like I just have to find an hour to do that, and I've got to record the screen, I have to record the audio, I have to then splice that together and edit it. I mean, I don't do much editing because I can't stand video editing, I really can't. But then I have to do thumbnails and upload that to YouTube and do descriptions and also do all the promotion behind the scenes and Instagram graphics and all sorts, and it's, no matter what form of art you're doing, what you're creating, it's a big commitment. And if you don't have passion, you're gonna have a real struggle sticking it out. And I think the people who aren't passionate, they don't do series for a reason. I've never seen anybody who really hails craft books write a series. I'm just going to put that out there. They only seem to write standalones, maybe a duology at a push. Maybe. But they openly talk about how fed up they get of, everything, the setting, the characters, just everything. It's like, well, where's the passion, mate? If you had passion, you wouldn't have that. And I'm not being funny. Because I have the passion for my work, I don't get tired of seeing Hyukai and visiting Melissa and Amarichi and seeing Ai Nagashima every time. It's one of those things that genuinely makes me happy. It brings me joy. Writing shorts brings me joy. Making art and concepting, all of that should bring you joy. All of that should have passion in it, because people can tell. People can tell when things have passion and love and care go into them. This podcast, the whole concept of it came about from passion. I wanted a space to have these talks eloquently without being interrupted. So, actually talk about passion and what matters to me as a writer. And, maybe provide a little bit of a voice for other people who are like me. I mean, I have mixed feelings about that, because I don't want to speak for other people, but I know there are other people who have a lot of passion out there who don't feel they can say it. And without this podcast having an underpinning of passion and actually just things I want to talk about, there's no chance I'd stick it out. And I knew that from the get-go, and that's why I was actually hesitant to do it at all. Because I thought, well, if I don't actually care about it, if it's just going to be, the classic really boring craft nonsense that's analysed, query logs, I'm not going to stick that out for more than 3 episodes, and it's just pointless actually going to all the admin to set it up. I want to provide a space that's different. I want to provide a space that's, artists talking about doing what they love. That's the point of Adventures Elsewhere. The other, there's more to this episode, I'm not going straight to the interview plug here. The other thing I feel with passion is your future as a writer kind of hinges on it. And this kind of does turn back to the point about not getting tired of your characters and your setting and all of that in series. Because if you're genuinely interested in, not necessarily even the characters, but the land and the history and the origin of all that, that breeds so many ideas for all kinds of things, be that shorts or micros or spin-off novels or sequel compendia or all sorts. Prequel series, who knows? And this is how I've ended up with over 30 projects at this point. This is it. It's the passion, it's the constant interest of, okay, but what's this guy's story? What does this guy do? Is there a way I can write a big origin trilogy spanning his whole life about this? I am spilling so much shit that nobody has a clue about, wow. I mean, I don't know how much it would mean to anybody who doesn't know, but I've mentioned a lot of things that I wouldn't ordinarily mention. But isn't that what passion does? Doesn't passion make you excited for new projects with some of the same elements, some of the same characters? I'm really excited for as seen on stage, and seeing I and Haru through Isamu's eyes. I'm really excited to see that, particularly certain drinking game exchanges between I and Haru, and some of the things with Hanzo, because Hanzo frequents that bar as well, and Sushi as well is a character I'm really looking forward to getting to know a bit better. He's Haru's dad, for what it's worth. But if you don't have passion, you don't have that? Like, I don't understand why you're sticking it out. Because the other thing if you really don't have passion is not only do readers know, you can tell when people just get sloppy and fed up, but there's a lack of realism. There's a lack of it not only feeling real, but people don't. If people get really fed up about, let's say it's someone going to social services about something, there are going to be like steps that are missed, or think like this is where a lot of plot holes are born. Is actually, I really can't be bothered to cover this decision, so I just won't, because I'm just tired, and there's a lot of stuff like that. And if you have enough passion and you really, really care about doing your book justice, you'll go back and fix it. If you don't have passion and care, then actually you'll settle for less than you should. And this is also true of characters. I mean, two-dimensional, even one-dimensional characters. You can tell there's just a lack of care there. There's a lack of passion. They don't want to know their characters. They don't. And I just think that's really disappointing. I mean, particularly when people try and do character-driven stuff and they're like that. Well, where does that stem from? That stems from a lack of care and a lack of proper passion and intrigue and really listening to things properly. The thing that really, I think, you can really tell when people don't have passion is in the details. Like, I did touch on this earlier with editing about, particular use of vocabulary and particular turns of phrase and callbacks and the real nuance of character, and when people do and don't say things, and the exact language they use to try and hint at things, and the raise of an eyebrow, the momentary frown, the twitch of a lip. If you don't have proper passion and you really don't care about doing your book justice, you'll just miss all that. But I think that's probably about the end of where I'm at here. If you are a fellow passionate writer and you really care about your stuff and you're also published or well on the way, please do get in touch. I would love to hear from any indie and self-pub people in particular. That doesn't mean I won't necessarily talk to trad-pub people. Email is the way to do that from now on, jade42black@gmail.com. There is a list of stuff I want to know that is in the description. Please do read that first. I don't want to give people automatic no's if I get inundated, so take the proper time and care, and for what it's worth, it doesn't have to be a new release. I mean, it can be something that's not actually out yet, and we can talk about pre-order dates and all that. More than happy to do that. It can be new, it can be 5 years old, 10 years old, 20 years old, whatever, bring it in. It might well be new to me, or it'll certainly be new to some of the listeners, so it's worth doing. It doesn't have to be adult, it can be YA. It'd be interesting to have a kidlit author on here, because that's just something that I'm so far removed on. I'm sure I would learn a lot. It would be also interesting to have poetry on here, short story collections. It'd be interesting to have somebody else talk about their experience with that. I'd actually really like to talk about that. Also, novellas, can be novels, it can be all sorts of stuff. If you want to do an overview episode of a trilogy you're writing, that's cool, I'll do that. Last but not least, where I am elsewhere, this is slightly different now. If you are looking for the home of the podcast, which you probably are, that is now Instagram. I am Jade_Black21 on there. On Instagram, you will get advance notice of what each episode is. I do reveals on Mondays. You'll also get little snippets from episodes, about what I'm talking about, and other things as well as I see fit. So follow me on Instagram if you are getting really into this podcast. Also subscribe, that would help. If you are looking for more about my writing and the determined ones, Twitter really is the place for that, mostly JBlack21. If you're looking more about art or random stuff, BlueSky's the place for that, JBlack21. For what it's worth, any big announcements about new podcast episodes, or big book news, big art news, anything really, that will go across all the new platforms, so don't feel the need to follow everything, follow what you want. If you're interested only in the podcast, that's cool. If you're interested only in the writing side of things, that's cool. If you're interested in all of it, that's great too. Whatever works for you. So, really, I think that's about all I have here, so you have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you for listening. If you've enjoyed this episode, please consider subscribing so you don't miss future content. Copyright Jade Black 2023.